Davey from Hashtag Dork here. Now, you know me, I'm the consummate team player. You know, I'm always looking out for the kids, you know, with the Triforce. I'm always listening to everyone's podcast. And today, I just couldn't do it with Mac and Goo today. They were doing their draft of N64 games, and they're all claiming to be these experts on Nintendo 64, claiming it to be, you know, the greatest video game console ever, and then just completely whiffing on the entire thing. And I think it's because, you know, Mac and Goo are a bit jocks. You know, they're jocks. You know, they're big sportos. You know, the whole start of their podcast being a sports podcast. And, you know, I just can't get behind that. So here I am, and I'm going to give you my 6 most underrated N64 games that I know of that they completely missed in their draft. Now, first, let me say this, too, that I don't understand how someone like Goo can go through and say that there aren't any good first-person games out there anymore, that they just don't exist, that the best games are multiplayer games. I don't think he plays video games, like, at all. So that's one thing I had a problem with. Although he was a big fan of a game called Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, which I've never heard of. I don't know what an ocarina is, but I'm sure it's pretty important to him. Some sort of whale, some sort of female whale, I don't know. And then Mac, who hates everybody, saying that the best games for N64 are meant to be played with friends. For someone who hates people to say that he wants to play with his friends, I don't get it. I don't get it. So away we go with Arvon D, Juicy Six Pack on the most underrated N64 games. First up, and this is a near lock for me when you're talking about N64 games, is Spider-Man. So there was a Spider-Man 64 game that came out. It didn't have anything to do with any of the movies. It came out before the movies. I mean, it was awesome. It followed more towards the animated series, but it was made by the same people who made Tony Hawk, so it was the same game engine. The web swinging was great. You can climb on all the surfaces, and it was great. You had a bunch of different costumes. So gameplay, there was some camera issues from time to time, but it's Spider-Man. You're going to be climbing all over things, so it's bound to happen at some point. So I don't know how they whiffed on this one, but they did. The next one, number 2, is a game called Snowboard Kids. Now, a lot of racing games they mentioned Diddy Kong Racing, they mentioned Mario Kart. They didn't mention Snowboard Kids. It was a downhill racer, kind of a predecessor to the SSX games that came out for the later consoles, which was super fun, customizing characters, customizing boards, customizing tricks. Just a super fun downhill racing game with some tricks mixed in. Where you had your 1080 game, which was kind of hard to play. Snowboard Kids was super easy to play, and one of the games that, you know, you should pick up if you're a big N64 connoisseur. Number 3, another near lock for me, Killer Instinct Gold. As you know, Killer Instinct was big in the arcade world. It was a fighting game. Combos were just starting to be a thing with Mortal Kombat 3 and kind of by accident in the Street Fighter games. And this one finally took hold of the combo concept and turned it on its head. You could do infinite combos with guys, and it was just super fun to play, super cool, and it was a great port from the arcade to the home console N64. And they touted this game when they first were thinking of doing it was called the Ultra 64, then the N64. You get the idea. It's an awesome game, cool fighter, check it out. I don't know how they missed this one. Number 4 is a game called Operation Winback. Now, this is a kind of unknown game. If you play a lot of N64, you probably haven't heard much about this game. But why this is important and why people should play this game is it was one of the first cover-based shooters. It's kind of a nod to the older Metal Gear games, but it's focused on covering, not in terms of stealth, but using it in terms of combat, where you're ducking behind cover, kind of like a predecessor to Gears of War in that way. And on top of that, you get to play as a character named Jean-Luc Cougar, which I don't know if there's any cooler name for a character. Jean-Luc Cougar. Next game, and this is what bugged me, Star Wars games for N64. We went with Pod Racer, which was terrible. And Jake Lloyd provided the voice for Anakin Skywalker, and I didn't think that kid could be more annoying, but he is somehow in the video game. So that takes it out right away. And then Rogue Squadron was mentioned. Rogue Squadron obviously is a great game, but one they didn't mention is Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Now this game is canon, so it takes place in between Empire and Return of the Jedi. A character named Dash Rendar starts on the Battle of Hoth, and then you go off on your own little adventure. It could fit into the Star Wars lore. It's considered canon by some, so I don't know how you don't mention this game and pick this up. The gameplay is a third-person shooter, much like Operation Winback. So it is a cool game. Very underrated. Has its quirks. Aiming kind of sucks in the game. But other than that, super fun game. And if you like Star Wars games and Star Wars stories, definitely pick this one up. All right, and the last one I'm going to mention, since we're so enamored with playing games with friends, your man Rich Keefe and I, we played it on PC, but they ported it to the N64, and it was a pretty successful port, and that is Worms Armageddon. Worms, if you haven't played the series before, you play a team of 6 or 8 worms. You can name them. Mine were all obscure Simpsons characters, and Rich's were the Wu-Tang worms, and he named all of his worms after Wu-Tang characters, not Wu-Tang rapists. And we would go head-to-head all the time. So if you want to play a game with friends, this involves some strategy. It involved, picking weapons, playing the wind, watching out for water, sacrificing some of your own worms in order to get a win. And much like GoldenEye, if you use the concrete donkey in this game, you are exactly that, a concrete donkey, and you don't belong anywhere near this game. So that's it for my juicy 6-pack of underrated N64 games. Again, I would like to reiterate how disappointed I am that we had quote-unquote video game experts doing a podcast about video games, and they just failed miserably. How do you take no mercy? You don't do WrestleMania 2000, but you do like WWF No Mercy? Come on, man. Like, what are we doing? Who am I paying? Who am I not paying here at this point? Fucking jocks.
Just a 6-pack.